So far, the things we've talked about are things that apply to most any lab, and they're things that make you more productive. So in this ad hoc lab, that is, it's self-contained in this video, I'm asking you to go practice those things and make those things a habit. Let's do it. So for this lab, I've got 5 activities for you. First, you create a text file that I'll call the Power Up template. It's where you configure these features that you can then copy and paste into every device in every lab you ever do from now on. Then at step 2, I want you to add whatever passwords you think you'd want to use habitually, put those in that text file. Then at step 3, we're going to practice copy and pasting that template in and test out your config and work out any syntax errors so that you know it works, so you're ready to use it habitually from now on. Then at number 4, you're going to practice that do command in config mode so you can use exec commands from config mode. And then we'll wrap it up with a little bit of a race between using command editing and just typing fast from the command line. All right, let's get into the lab. So per that title slide, I'm calling this a Power Up template, but it's just a text file. So I want you to create a text file basically, and I want it to have config like this. Now this config has some of those key features that just make you more productive when you're using the CLI. And if you look at this and say, I don't know those commands, then go back and watch the content video that explains those. There are links in the description that should show up above my head here in the video as well. And make a file. You can even add comments in the file that begin with an exclamation point. Now, you're going to later use this to copy and paste it into the config. They won't show up in the config file on the device, but you'll have them in your text file, all right? So create your, quote, Power Up template, just a word to refer to it. But again, so create a new file. You want it to be formatted as plain text, that is not a Word doc, because it has hidden formatting characters, and that'll get in the way of your later copy and paste. You want to save it somewhere obvious where you can find it again and again and again, like even on your desktop, for instance. Also, add those comments with an exclamation point as the first character in the line if you want to remind yourself of what it's there for, and we're going to copy and paste it. I'll demo that copy and paste here in a moment. It's not too hard, but it's useful to see it once. You're going to practice that at step 3 in this lab. So, first task, go ahead and hit pause and do that very thing. Create a file with this kind of contents in it. And again, the goal is for you to later copy and paste this in. But oh, by the way, every time you do that, you're going to read the config a little bit, and it will help you learn the commands and be ready for exam day. Next, I want you to add password config to this template text file. For instance, do you always want to have the same enable console and telnet passwords available on your lab devices when doing a lab? If you do, figure out what that config looks like in this sample, and put that in the text file. Now, as an example, I'm showing you both the enable password and enable secret commands. You don't need both. I put them both here just for you to review the syntax of the commands, but you might want an enable secret command and then console password configuration and VTY password configuration. Now, if you look at that and think, I don't remember those commands, it's a great time to go back and review. Above my head, there should be a card linking to that video. It's also in the description that talks about password configuration. So review that, come up with the config you want to add to the text file and add it. That's your task right now in lab. And you might not want to stop here with this kind of config. You might want to add SSH config. It looks something like this. Again, I'm not going to review how to configure it. You can look at the video that explains password config and remind yourself if you don't remember this. But your goal now is to expand that file that you're going to use to copy and paste its contents into lab devices at the beginning of labs, your Power Up template, if you will. So your task right now, add to your lab file, choose your password options you want to use habitually. Why can we do that? Well, it turns out from here forward in the course and in the flow of the book, most labs pay zero attention to the settings in your template, both the password settings and those productivity kinds of settings, because they're focused on the next networking feature, all right? So you could just very easily improve your productivity in lab and have consistent passwords in those just by copy and pasting for about a minute amongst your 4, 5, or 6 devices in lab. So that's what I'm setting you up for. So be ready to apply that template. That's the goal. Now, if you do happen to use the SSH config that I just showed you, there's a packet tracer issue to overcome. there was this one command hidden in there that ends with modulus 128, and Packet Tracer doesn't understand those keywords in the now current version. It'll give you an error message about that. So here's what happens. Instead, use this shorter version of the command, type it in, don't copy and paste it, just type it in. And when you type it, you're going to get an interactive prompt that says, what's the modulus? And just type 1024 and press enter. So you won't be able to copy and paste that command in. So just be warned of that. All right, so your task right now is to pause now and either watch that video to learn more and remind yourself about password config, or if you remember enough about it, go ahead and add to your template what you think you'd like to have for password configs in your networking devices habitually. So the habit I want you to form is adding this config to your lab devices for future labs. So why can we get away with that? Well, these videos match the outlines of the books. Here in the Chapter 6 videos and material, we talked about simple passwords, and we talked about these miscellaneous productivity commands. And the remaining labs all the way through the books, Volumes 1 and Volume 2, and the related videos, the labs mostly ignored those settings. Those are just considered overhead things that we're not worried about, and they don't impact the other labs, all right? So you can go ahead and set those settings to the way you want them and you prefer them to be. So personal preference for you, truly. I'm not trying to influence you either way. You can go with a smaller set of commands and just take those productivity settings like we see in this part of the template and copy and paste those into all your devices, and that's worth doing, all right? And then you're done. But if you like the idea of having consistent passwords in all your devices just to make things easier to navigate, then go ahead and copy and paste that broader set of commands you have with all those passwords in them and use those in all your devices either way. So small set, large set, either way. And the goal then is to get in there and copy what's in your template file and paste it into config mode in each of your switches and routers in a lab topology as a baseline configuration, all right? So what I want you to do right now in this lab is to use that text file and test it and fix the syntax errors in your template until your template is fully correct, all right? So here are your lab instructions, if you will. Copy and paste your template contents into Packet Tracer in config mode. There are details here. I'm going to demonstrate the basic process here in just a second as well. And then as you do that, once you've pasted, if there are syntax errors, you're going to see error message popping up, but then it's going to keep scrolling on down as more and more text gets pasted in, right? So you want to scroll up and look for these error messages and find out which of your commands in your text file had errors in them and fix the errors in your PowerUp template. And then you want to repeat the copy and paste into config mode, copy the whole contents of your template back into config mode until when you do that, there are no error messages cropping up in response to your paste. All right, so once you've done that, that tells you that, hey, you don't have any syntax errors in your template, so save the file. Now it's ready to reuse at your leisure for future labs, and just to make doubly sure, when you open up the sample Packet Tracer file that's linked in this video's description, it's there for your use for this lab. There's a switch 1 and a switch 2. You can move over to switch 2 and try the process again with your confirmed correct template just as another check to make sure, hey, there really aren't any syntax errors in there. So you can pause now and do this step of the lab, but I'm going to do a quick demo of the process next just so you can see the particulars. So I've opened up the Packet Tracer file that's linked in the description, and switch 1 and switch 2 in this case don't have any non-default config. And I've also opened up this text file that I prepared that's basically the configuration just for the productivity features. And I've purposely typoed a few commands. For instance, the no IP -domain -lookup command has far too many dashes in it. And the line telnet 015, it's not telnet, it's VTY would be the correct command. And this last line is an attempt at a comment line, but the line does not begin with the first character of an exclamation point, so it's incorrect. So those are all going to cause errors when we paste it in, but I'm going to select all the text and copy it with a keyboard shortcut. Then I'm going to go over to switch 1 to its command line, and I'm already in privilege mode, so let's just do a configure terminal. And now we're in config mode. Now, you can try keyboard shortcuts with Packet Tracer, or with any old terminal you're using to get into any Cisco device. But generally with Packet Tracer, if you right click and select paste, that's the best way to paste the text in. So I've done that. And if you scan up visually, you'll see, hey, there was a invalid input after that incorrect syntax of the no IP dash domain lookup. And then under line telnet 015, it gave me an error message about that one. And then at the very bottom, this incorrect line, there's no carriage return line feed at the end of that text file. So as soon as I pressed enter, it told me that that was incorrect input as well. So if I go back over to my text file then and click it, and I get in here and say, well, I don't need any dashes in that command. And maybe that's a VTY here. And maybe I meant these two lines to be together, notice there. And hey, nothing happened at the end. Let me put a few carriage returns there at the end of the file. And now if I copy the whole file and get back here, and just to keep it clean, I'll get out of config mode and all the way back in so you can see it more easily visually. I'm going to do the right click and click paste, and we'll get the paste to come in again, and there's no syntax error up here, none here, none with that comment line, and we've just configured our standard config in this device. The next step in Lab is to practice the do command in config mode. So as a reminder, if you're in config mode and you type an exec command like this one, it's rejected, right? It's the wrong mode. But if you precede the exec command with the word do, it tells iOS to say, hey, do this exec command in config mode while not leaving config mode. And there you go. We see the output of the show interfaces status command. Now let's just say you're in config mode and you think, hey, I can do exec commands, right? And you type the same command again, but you forget the word do up front and you say, oh man, I did the wrong thing. I should have typed do first, and you don't want to type the whole thing. Here's what you could do. You could up arrow to retrieve the command, but your cursor would be out here on the far right. Then Control A moves the cursor to the far left, where you could type do and a blank or space bar. And now you've got do, show interfaces status, and press the enter key. And that's a pretty quick way to add a do to the front. So what's your task here at this step in this lab? Well, here's the deal. I want you to practice the do command. So you can open up that packet tracer file that's linked in the bottom, or honestly, any CLI will do for this step of the lab. And here's a list of 6 exec commands. Just get into config mode and issue them from config mode with the do command. So for this last task in this lab, I want you to do some command retrieval and editing, and we'll have a little bit of a race. So here's a reminder of some of the command keystrokes to edit commands once you've retrieved them. So they're here for your reference. Now here's a list of 6 commands I want you to try in this order as part of this exercise, and I'm going to list them again at the end of this section so you'll have it right there in front of you when you hit pause to do lab. You can open the packet tracer file in the video description and open up either of the switches, but honestly, you just need some working command line in order to do this part of the lab, where you can type the commands and retrieve them and edit them. So here's the idea. I want you to do those 6 commands, and I want you to do them by retrieving old commands and editing. That's what I'm calling approach number 1, all right? Retrieve the earlier commands, edit them, press enter, retrieve an earlier command, edit, press enter to get those 6 commands done. And practice that until it's starting to feel a little more natural, all right? But then I want you to try the other approach, which is just retype each command. Now, if you're typing all the letters in every command parameter, that's going to be slower. But of course, our natural tendency is to try to abbreviate them once we realize we can do that. So I would say it's fine to do that. So approach 1 is retrieve and edit. Approach 2 is retype with abbreviations. And you know, sometimes one's going to be faster or better for you or more natural for you, and sometimes the other is. And I just want you to explore that a little bit here in lab. So I've set up a process for you. I want you to do that list of 6 commands with the first approach, retrieve and edit, and then do the same list of commands with approach 2. That is, retype each command, but you can abbreviate them as much as you can figure out how to abbreviate them. And then do another round with each approach, because you're going to be getting better at this skill the more you practice. And then just take a moment to sit back and think, which do you like better at this point? And that may change over time for you or depending on what you're doing. And you can even pop a message to me in the comments and say, hey, I'd like command retrieval better, or hey, I really just like typing the abbreviated commands in better. I'd be curious to know. So it's time to do this last task in lab. Here's the list of commands. Do the list with approach 1 and then approach 2 and let me know what you think. Now, you may have watched this lab video and thought, I'm not going to do the lab yet, but I need to go back and watch that instructional video about these commands. Well, that's the video on the left, so click that. But if you've gone ahead and done the lab and think, hey, I'm ready for more learning, I want the next chapter, that's the video on the right. So click either one and move on regardless. Hey, thanks for spending time with my videos. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.